All right. Let's get back to my. All right. OpenStreetMaps and ArcGIS. Stephen Moore.
Yeah.
Read your abstract here. For over 15 years, OpenStreetMap has been free and open database of the world of GIS professionals and casual mappers alike. As the quality and quantity of the data in the map has increased over the years, it has become increasingly a viable alternative to other commercial data providers. In this presentation, we will cover the brief history of OpenStreetMap, show how Esri is using OSM and our content and software products on how you can access for your work, and discuss how we can collectively contribute to the OSM project, and it enters a new era of community participation. All right, thank you for
Sure. Can you hear me okay?
Yes.
Okay, and so I'm sharing this on an external monitor, so it's kind of like a widescreen. But yeah, if anybody's having any trouble seeing anything, just let me know. I can switch over to my laptop. But cool. So yeah, kind of as obviously I'm talking about OpenStreetMap today. My name's Steve Moore. I've been at Esri for coming up on 10 years, and been working with OpenStreetMap in various capacities for probably about the last 5 or 6 years. Actually started at the beginning of this year full-time working on OpenStreetMap on the ArcGIS Aligned content team. Before that, I actually worked in professional services on the Maps for Adobe Creative Cloud product. So I think Sarah Bell, my former teammate, presented on that earlier. She said she was going to kind of badmouth me for leaving the team. I don't know if she did, but so that was, during that time I was also working on OSM. So probably safe to say any kind of OSM thing that Esri's put out in the last 5 or so years, I've worked on in some capacity. So yeah, so today I just want to cover kind of quickly a brief history of OpenStreetMap, what it is, sort of how it came to be, and then talk about how Esri's historically leveraged that data, that map as a product, and how we continue to leverage it through to today. And then talk about some of the new things we're working on, and also some potential opportunities that I think some people on the call probably would be interested in joining, some opportunities for contributing data to OpenStreetMap and helping to improve it as a data source. So I don't know how much familiarity everybody in the call has with OSM, but I'll just sort of run through this quickly. So it's basically a free editable map of the world. So it's a crowdsourced, open source geodatabase, essentially. You can kind of think about like Wikipedia, but a map. And actually that was one of the inspirations for the creator, Steve Coast, that's his picture there. Created OpenStreetMap in around 2004, partially inspired by Wikipedia, but also kind of the impetus for it really was the proprietary nature of authoritative spatial data in the UK, which is also the case in some other European countries. So it's really, the popularity has really exploded, particularly, in those kind of Western European countries. So since 2004, it's grown hugely. There's millions of registered users, and that's registered users who are actually editing the data and contributing to it. There's also millions of others that are ultimately consumers of the end product, or some byproduct downstream from kind of the source data. And so it's hard to gauge exactly what the reach is, but it's quite large, and millions of people contributing to it. So it's a very geographically diverse set of users. I mean, there's people obviously all over the world that are doing this, that have ideally local knowledge of the area that they're mapping. But it's also interesting. I mean, there's a lot of different use cases. So it's hobbyists, or sometimes they're referred to as like craft mappers that really just enjoy the process of collecting data, putting it into the map. It's just something they enjoy doing. But then there's also like cyclists, hikers, runners, who want to put things like bike trails and running paths and things like that into the map. And then obviously GIS professionals too, who have a different set of use cases generally, but are looking more to be able to do spatial analysis, things like that. So also, in addition to that kind of diversity of intent or background of the people that are involved in the project, the data is collected and edited in a handful of different ways. So kind of sort of I don't know, you could call it like the gold standard or sort of ideally, data would be collected from a manual survey. So people that go out with a GPS unit, they have, a clipboard, they take down notes of everything that they're kind of seeing and mapping. They kind of go, back home with all that information, put it all in all at once. So there's people that do this for, whole neighborhoods, whole villages, and in the UK, like small little villages, things like that. More commonly, at least now, I would say that people do what's sometimes referred to as armchair mapping, where you're on a web editor, you're looking at an area where you don't necessarily live. I mean, ideally, you'd still have some local knowledge of that area. So you're not just kind of guessing at what you're looking at, but you're using an aerial imagery layer as a reference to sort of, digitize new features and put them on the map. So in the past few years, and this is something I'm going to kind of touch on, I think, for the rest of the presentation, there's this growing interest or community of corporate editors that are enhancing OpenStreetMap. So it's not so much that it's people trying to add data. I mean, there is data being added by these corporate editors, but it's improving the data for their use cases. And Esri is doing the same thing in some respects. So I'll talk about that. But a good example of this would be like Amazon. Amazon adds driveways to OpenStreetMap wherever they go. So obviously, driveways are very important. So if you see an area on the map with a ton of driveways, it's probably the Amazon editing team moving through there. But then there's other teams from big companies like Facebook and Microsoft that are doing the same thing. So not without controversy, I should also add. There's some pushback from the community, but so yeah, how has Esri supported OpenStreetMap? We've supported it for many years. We have for about 10 years. We haven't hosted, but we've made available the raster OpenStreetMap base map. Made it available as an option in our base map gallery. So if you're in ArcGIS Online in the map viewer, you click the base map drop down. By default, you'll see the OSM raster tiles. So these are not tiles that are created by Esri or hosted by us, but we make it an option there. A few years ago, probably about 4 years ago, we made our world imagery services available for use in the main OpenStreetMap editors. So kind of the two main ones are ID and JOSM. ID is a web client. It's really just a web application. If you go to openstreetmap.org and you start editing, you're using ID. It's, I would say, the most commonly used, but it's a kind of a stripped down experience. It's really user friendly. It's good for most people. JOSM is for sure less user friendly, but it's far more powerful. We've also been a gold level corporate member for, I think, probably around 10 years as well. So this entails, we donate money and resources to the OpenStreetMap project. So if you don't know, I guess I didn't mention it, but OpenStreetMap's 100% volunteer driven. So there's no paid employees of OSM. Anything, all the hardware is either donated or purchased with donated funds. The people that maintain the databases, the network infrastructure, all that are completely volunteers. They're just, people that are dedicated to the project. So it's even more remarkable that it's grown to the scale that it has. We're also present at a lot of the State of the Map events, which are kind of the main conference events for OpenStreetMap. So there's a international State of the Map, and then the State of the Map US, we're typically more involved in. So we sponsor those, we attend them, present at them, usually have a booth, things like that. So we're also working with the data to support our users. We do this in a handful of ways. One thing that we've done for a long time is supplemented the Esri base maps with OpenStreetMap data. So there's many parts of the world where OSM is actually the best data source. So developing countries, Southeast Asia, the Middle East, Northern Africa, small island nations, things like that. There's little to no commercial data coverage. It's generally better in OpenStreetMap. So we actually just kind of supplement our base layers or our commercial data for our base maps with that OSM data, and that helps us kind of fill in those gaps. So also what we've been doing more recently is really focusing on enabling our users to access OSM data, the actual data underneath the raster tiles or any base map. For most people, kind of the end product that they see or in their mind, maybe OpenStreetMap is the base map, but really it's the data behind it that's much more powerful. And so we've been working on ways to allow our users to access that data more easily across our platform, also contribute to it in more in easier ways. And because a base map's good for visualization, but beyond that, you can't do much. And obviously, our users are typically doing much more kind of intensive geospatial analysis, and they need data, not map tiles. And we're also improving the data, like I mentioned, some of these other corporate entities are doing, so that it becomes more useful across our platform for our use cases. Again, things like geocoding and routing and analysis. So now I'm going to kind of talk more about things that we're more recently working on. So this is the OpenStreetMap vector tile base map. So contrasted with that raster tile base map that I talked about, this is created and maintained 100% by Esri. So it's cooked 100% from OpenStreetMap data. There is no commercial vendor data mixed in, and hosted in ArcGIS Online, updated about every 3 weeks. We kind of take a snapshot of the most recent OSM data, and it's on about a 3 to 4 week cadence. It's freely available to everyone. So kind of the nature of the OSM data license, if you're not familiar, it's very open. You can actually resell the data if you want. You can kind of do whatever you want with it. So because the data license is so open, we're able to distribute our base map tiles within a sort of equivalently open license. It's a little bit different, but it gives us more flexibility than our other base maps. We initially created a base map style that mimics the sort of out of the box OSM raster tile base map. So if you're familiar with that look, it looks exactly the same. And then we've added since then additional styles. So OpenStreetMap cartography with a hillshade relief underneath, Esri streets, light and dark gray canvas, things like that. So this is a bit more recent. So the vector tile base map's been out for a couple years. This is more recent. It's actually still in beta. We have live data layers of OpenStreetMap data. So these are thematic layers like buildings, highways, shops, points of interest, things like that. And kind of the key point with these is that we're actually updating it every minute with what we call minutely diffs from OpenStreetMap.org. So every 60 seconds, we download the previous 60 seconds worth of change sets, and we actually ingest them into our hosted feature layers. So there's a lot of kind of moving parts behind the scene, but ultimately we're just pushing those edits, those change sets up to our hosted layers. So it's in beta, like I mentioned. I'm not going to click on this beta group link right now, but I think I'll have some time at the end to do a couple of quick demos, and I'll show you that group. We're breaking them down by region, so North America, Africa, Europe, things like that. And I mean, I think the benefits are fairly obvious. I mean, I would assume most people in the call are probably familiar with kind of our ArcGIS Online platform and how the hosted feature layers work. They're obviously very scalable and performant, but really I think the key, for our user base, or the key, value is you can do these additional capabilities like spatial analysis, extract data features. You can re-symbolize the data. You can create your own custom pop-ups, labels, kind of whatever you want to do. You can actually take a copy. So basically, these are view layers. You can take the view layer, make your own copy, modify it however you wish, and then save it in your own org, and then kind of use it from there. So another thing that we're doing as far as involving ourselves with OSM is helping our users but also helping OSM by getting this user community data that we have into OpenStreetMap and really creating easier ways for our users to do that. Obviously, our customers have a lot of really high quality, relevant GIS data. A lot of it's already accessible through open data sites. So it's, it just makes sense, really. We've got kind of this big repository of data sort of at our fingertips, and it's people that we are in direct contact with. So so this is definitely something, if anybody's interested, I mean, we can follow up offline. We're definitely, looking to increase this sort of database. One thing I will mention is data licensing is very important. So it's important for your data and also for the OpenStreetMap database. So it is a very open license, but there's some details that can get real kind of sticky real fast, and so it's not real cut and dry all the time. So you do need to make sure that your data is licensed in a way that's compatible with the OSM data license. So kind of similar to the other feature layers that we have, the live ones that I just mentioned, we're hosting these in a group also in ArcGIS Online. And right now it's just building footprints and address points, but we're up to like millions of features, millions of particularly building footprints. It's mostly that. And I have a handful of municipalities here that have contributed data. I picked the ones kind of from the region that we're talking to today, but we have them from all over the US and actually even in Europe too, outside of the US. So, oh, and then one thing, yeah, I hopefully the screenshot you can see kind of in the middle there in that lower right corner, there's a checkbox. So for people that are members of our Community Maps program, we added this to make it more easy to give us permission to share your data. So like I mentioned, it can get real tricky with the licensing. This checkbox, it just says share my data with other map providers. So this is kind of like, lets you very easily just sort of give blanket approval to us to share your data with OpenStreetMap and some other partners. So, you know, hopefully avoid some of the legal wrangling that often, you know, comes with these kinds of things. So that's, I think, made things a lot easier. So kind of the real new stuff that we've been working on, probably the most exciting stuff, I think, is, yeah, it sort of dovetails with what I just talked about, actually. But what we're doing is we're taking that data from our Community Maps contributors, we're publishing it as hosted feature layers to ArcGIS Online, and then we're exposing them in some of the main OpenStreetMap editors to make it more easy and efficient to get that data into OSM. So I talked about JOSM earlier, that's the screenshot there on the right. Rapid is the other screenshot. It's basically the ID editor, but it's a fork of the ID code base, and it's maintained by Facebook. It's sort of part of their Map with AI toolset. So really the main intent with it has always been to take the Microsoft AI generated building footprint data, which I don't know if you're familiar with that, but they've kind of got this huge AI generated building footprint data set that that they keep adding to. So to take that, also to take Facebook ML generated roads and kind of give people a really sort of like an assisted mapping workflow is kind of how it's characterized, where you don't have to draw the features. You can just import them from these layers, see them on the map, and then just sort of click yes to include, you know, as you go down a street or whatever. I'm going to demo this at the end, so I think it'll probably make a little more sense when you can see it. But so what we've been doing is actually working with Facebook and collaborating with them to expand this capability to include ArcGIS feature layers. So it's not just the two AI generated layers now, it's actually also includes all these Community Maps donated feature layers that we have that you can do the same thing with. So bringing all this data, you know, from, it's obviously not AI generated data, so it's a little bit different than what's been there in Rapid, and it typically has more attributes. You know, it's very good coverage. Obviously, it's coming from cities and counties and things like that. So. Daylight, this is also another new thing that we've been continuously working on for about the last, a little over a year. So this is basically a new OSM, not just a base map, it's also kind of considered like a data distribution. So it's not a fork of OpenStreetMap where it's diverged from kind of the mainline OSM and it's its own thing. It's just OSM data, but it's been sort of QA'd to have things like vandalism, bad geometries, you know, kind of just like bad editing practices removed from it. And the reason for this, so it's, well, I guess I should say first, it's being built and it was sort of started in collaboration between like Esri, Facebook, Microsoft, some other companies. And really the reason for doing it, because OpenStreetMap is completely open, anybody can edit it. And so occasionally vandalism will make its way in. Pretty frequently vandalism will make its way in. Occasionally it will get kind of missed by, you know, the people that are sort of keeping an eye on that kind of thing, and then it'll end up in a very visible public facing, you know, map or application from one of these large companies. So there've been a couple pretty high profile incidents in the last, you know, 2 or 3 years where Facebook or Microsoft or, you know, a company like that had to sort of explain why they've got profanity showing up on a map on their website, and it's not an easy thing to explain. Obviously, it's bad publicity, so kind of want to avoid that. So the reason for Daylight is to avoid that, to strip out those, or, you know, kind of clean up the bad editing and some of it, and get rid of vandalism primarily. So that was announced. Facebook announced that in early 2020. first announced the sort of release of it. Later that year, last year, Microsoft also announced that they were going to start providing their AI-generated building footprint data that I mentioned kind of alongside the daylight distribution as like a sidecar file that you can apply. So if you import the daylight, sort of main database, you can apply the Microsoft Buildings layer to it and kind of mash up that data. And then later on, also that year, last November, we announced the availability of our first OSM daylight vector tile-based map. So same thing as the OSM vector tile-based map that we're hosting, but it's just cooked 100% from OSM daylight data. And then kind of the more recent sort of involvement with this is just a couple months ago, we started including that same community maps data that I talked about that we're publishing and then making available through Rapid. We started including our community maps building footprint data along, or not, I shouldn't say alongside, but actually with the Microsoft building footprint data. So we conflated with that data, and then those data sets are sort of en masse conflated against mainline OpenStreetMap. And so you get sort of this three-tiered, kind of comprehensive coverage, which has been really great. So I won't read the little mission statement there, but kind of what I already explained. And we're doing this on about a monthly basis. The daylight map distribution release cadence is monthly, and we've been able to stick to that. We're actually up to release V 1.0 just a few days ago, so it's moving along. Okay, I think I'm doing okay on time, so let me jump out. And that still look okay on my screen? Okay, so this is sort of, the best starting point for anything OpenStreetMap related as far as Esri goes, I would say. It's OpenStreetMap, it's obviously an ArcGIS online organizations, OpenStreetMap.maps.arcgis.com. And we have links to obviously the base maps, also the feature layers that I talked about, the live ones that we're keeping up to date. And I'll show the beta group for the live layers. So it's this OpenStreetMap layers beta, and we are in the process of coming out of beta actually, like right now. So that's going to start changing. I'm not sure exactly if we're going to do it all at once or what, but it'll be, we'll have a production group with actual sort of more stable released layers in there. But so if I go to view all group content, kind of the easiest way to see it. So we can break it down by, or I can filter by region. They're all feature layers, so there's nothing really there, but you can search for a country or a continent, North America, South America, or a specific layer type that you're looking for. So I'm just going to go with buildings for North America. I'm going to add it to a new map. And I'm going to go, and I hope I remember the name of the city that I found in Wisconsin. I don't know, is anybody from Baraboo? I had not heard of it until just a couple days ago, but so yeah, let me clear that. So right now we're looking at the OpenStreetMap, the Esri's OpenStreetMap vector tile base map. But if I click the base map drop down, this has been customized, so it's just OSM base maps, but you can kind of see some of the styles that I talked about. So light gray canvas, the OSM with relief is actually what we're looking at right here. Daylight, things like that. So I'm going to switch to. Oh, this changed. I wanted to see. Okay, well, that should work. So I'm going to zoom in a little bit to, let me find it, 6th and 6th and Oak. So if I zoom in, it's a little bit tricky to see. Hopefully it's coming through on my screen, but these colored polygons, let me actually switch, sorry. Let me switch to something a little easier to see. So these colored polygons on top, these are the features that are coming from our hosted feature layer. So if I click on a feature, I can actually query it. I can see the attributes that are coming through the OSM ID because this is all actual data in OSM. So it has a unique identifier from OpenStreetMap. And you'll notice like if I click on different buildings, I get different attributes, and that just depends on what data the person who created that feature decided to put in or had the knowledge to put in. So if I click on like this one, it's got street number, street name, city, zip code, or postcode, all sorts of stuff. So it's just kind of hit or miss what you're going to get. So let me switch back to OSM with relief. And I'm going to zoom into this kind of neighborhood right here. So I've got a couple building footprints that are existing in our feature layer, but these, this is a little confusing. We had I don't know where just our regular base map went. Well, anyway, so I'm only seeing a couple buildings that are actually coming from that feature layer. These other buildings here are coming from, I think, probably the Microsoft building footprints layer, but they're in the base map. So typically, you know, if I could switch to the, I don't know why I can't do that. Give me 1 second, actually, because it's gonna make more sense if I can. Okay, sorry about that. So now we're looking at the mainline OpenStreetMap database, and so you can see that there's no actual building footprints in OpenStreetMap for this area except for these couple here that are in our hosted feature layer. And if I turn that off, you can see them. Well, actually can't. They didn't get tiled yet in the OpenStreetMap base map, raster base map. But you can see that there's no other data on this block here. So now I'm going to jump over to Rapid. So again, this is the kind of the fork of the ID editor that Facebook maintains. And I'm going to zoom into the same area. Oops, a little too far. So, and you know what? Let me do one thing that I forgot. Okay. So in the same area, and I can see that these are the features that are already in OpenStreetMaps. These are being streamed basically from the OSM, the main OSM database. And kind of the point, you know, that I talked about earlier of this particular editing application is to get these Facebook roads and Microsoft buildings into the map. So I've turned them off, and it can kind of bog down the UI, so I won't show you, but it's basically the same experience as what I'll show here. So let me back up just so you can see what I did there. So this view manage data set. So this is kind of the new thing that we've added in collaboration with Facebook. So if I click that, this is pulling all the items from a group in ArcGIS Online that is the feature layers that we've published from that community maps data. And I'm going to jump all the way here to Sauk County, which is the county that we're currently looking at. Although most of you probably know that. So I'm going to add that, and okay. So I don't know, it's a little bit hard to see on the map here, but these yellow polygons, these are features that are being streamed from the hosted feature layer kind of dynamically on the fly in the client, just rendering on this map as I pan and zoom. So what I'm going to do is click this little background layer dropout, and like I mentioned, we made our world imagery service available as a background option. So this background pane is exactly the same in the main ID editor. So you only got a couple options. There's Bing, Maxar, Mapbox, which I think is a combination of other sources, and that's kind of it. So having Esri there, and actually we also have Clarity. So in this case, the Esri imagery is not real sharp. So if I switch to Clarity, I think it's a little bit better. Yeah. So then you can use that as that background reference layer. So all you really need to do, I'm going to click on one of these building polygons. It shows me the attributes that are on that feature coming from the feature service in ArcGIS Online. So building, yes, address state, Wisconsin, and then a source that we're sort of auto-populating. And then I can just click use this feature, and I can change any tags if I have the knowledge, if I know that address or I know whatever the type of roof or the height or whatever I want to add, I can do that as well. And since these are houses, I'm going to change it from building equals yes to building equals house. And I'll just do a couple here real quick. And so obviously, I mean, like I said, the main benefit is the data's already there. You kind of just have to approve it, more or less. You don't have to hand draw everything. The data's already there for you, and comes in with attributes in most cases. So, okay, so I'm just gonna do those two. I'll click save. Have to add a little comment so that people know what I did. And I'll upload that. And I think I'm probably running out of time here, but I'm going to really quickly jump back to a slide just for a second, just to kind of explain what's happening right now. So I just put those two edits through Rapid into the main OpenStreetMap database. So it's going up to the cloud hosted database. that all the OpenStreetMap data is hosted in, and the same kind of path that any other edit, that anybody else in the world happened to have just made in the last 60 seconds, going into that main database. Somewhere in the next 30 seconds or so, we're going to pull those minutely diffs down, like I mentioned earlier. We kind of process them, do a bunch of backend stuff, and then those change sets will be pushed up to our hosted feature layers, and it will include the edit that I just made. And I guess maybe just a little point of clarification. We're publishing 3 actual feature services. They're just points, lines, and polygons for each region. And then those thematic layers that I talked about, those are feature layer views that we're creating on top of the feature services. And one little kind of side note, I don't think I mentioned this earlier, or I guess I did. Yeah, you can take the feature layer views and sort of customize them. Particularly, you can filter out features that you might not want. So you could take that buildings layer. If you just wanted to see commercial buildings, you could just apply another filter to it, and that's all you would see. Whatever makes sense for your use case. And then really, they're just like any other feature layer. So you can access them across the ArcGIS platform, not just ArcGIS.com. I mean, any other app that can consume a feature layer can consume these live layers as well. So pretty cool. So I think I probably gave it enough time. So if I go back, so you remember we added, these are the existing buildings here. I just added these 2. And usually by now they should have come through. So yeah, there they are. So in that time that I was showing the slide, the data made that whole sort of round trip, from a non-Esri editing client up to the OSM database, down into or more like up into our services in the cloud. And then those changes just appear automatically because this is a dynamic feature service and not a tiled map service. So you can see the tags that I put in. You can actually click view this feature. It'll take you to OpenStreetMap.org, and you can get all the details on it. That's me. I just created it 2 minutes ago. You can see the change set history, all kinds of stuff like that. So yeah, I think I am probably out of time. But yeah, hopefully that gives you kind of a good idea of what we're doing with OpenStreetMap. Definitely, if you have any questions or interest, you can email me, follow up. I can take questions now too. And yeah, thanks for your time.
Yeah, that's really cool. We're currently working on a project right now, and Carmen's working on it, and she's getting all the trail information for biking and hiking in the Capel area. And okay, one of the things that we want to do is get that data into OSM, because a lot of the folks, the bikers and hikers, they use that information, download it into their GPS. What would be the best way to get our spaghetti trails into OSM fairly quickly without, because there is some stuff in there, but it's all wrong. I don't say all of them, but
right. Yeah, I mean, so I guess the sort of assisted mapping workflow that I demoed there, it's just for building footprints right now, but we are looking to expand that to other feature types. I think the next one's probably going to be roads. So, that would be an option. It's not quite there yet, but that would be I think the next place we're going to go. And really roads, trails, paths, it's kind of all the same sort of thing in OpenStreetMap. So when we have support for that would be the best way to do it. I think for now, probably the quickest way, you can do an import into OpenStreetMap. They're sort of, I wouldn't say frowned upon, but you have to really kind of, cross your T's and dot your I's. There's some hoops that they want you to jump through, but you can sort of bulk import a data set. And yeah, I mean, I can send you some links on kind of the guidance to do that. But yeah, rather than going through and correcting, incorrect features or digitizing them all by hand, you can skip a lot of that, as long as it's good data and you sort of have community approval, particularly like local community approval. So I'm not sure what the kind of like OSM, local user group is in your area, but yeah, for now that would probably be the best way to go.
Yeah, she's working with the local groups to get the trail names in there and the correct locations, but even that we'll still have to do some site visits. Yeah,
it's we're trying to, I mean, it's mostly, there's a lot of manual things when you're dealing with OpenStreetMap. It's, one of the things we're trying to, like I said, kind of open up, because there's just not a lot of stuff out there. I mean, the dynamic feature layers, there's really no way to get there's nobody else kind of like doing anything like that. You know, there's some things where you can sort of query the data, but if you want to sort of, you know, work with live data and do mapping and analysis, there's not really much out there. So.
Cool. Yeah, thank you for presenting today.
Yeah.
That's really helpful.
Great. Yeah. Thanks for the invite.
Anybody else with questions?